All right, guys, what's going on? Coming off a pretty decent weekend from Baku, even though we didn't have that opportunity to get some points. But little update: we never did get that engine upgrade that we wanted. It actually it actually failed, and we had to repurchase it. So we're gonna be out of luck for the additional power output. But we did end up replacing those parts. So yeah, we put those parts in. They are pending. We will get them by the race, hopefully. And that'll hopefully keep us in contention to try to get us back in the points. As we've been pretty unfortunate recently. And only having 8 points for the championship right now, knocking us back to T12 in the driver standings, and we're still sitting in 7th in the constructors, with a pretty big gap between us and AlphaTauri. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and knock out practice and get to qualifying. And as you can see, we dropped down the list again for the performance comparison. But with the upgrades that we have, if we get at least half of them, let's see, where is it at? If we get at least half of these, we should be back up there in the middle of the pack for points contention. So you can see the provisional upgrades would put us back up towards AlphaTauri and McLaren, and then just behind Mercedes. So yeah, so let's get it. Practice knocked out of the way, and then we'll see you guys for qualifying. Alright guys, what's going on? I'm coming back after air. We're doing our update after practice, sorry about that. And we ran pretty good. We managed to run a wet setup on a wet practice 3 to see how the race would kind of feel like for the wet weather. As we go back into our messages for our weather forecast, looks like we're going to be starting most likely on the wet. And then about a third of the way through, it'll drop down to intermediates. So hopefully we can get that pit stop just right, that way we don't overheat the wet tires too much. And go in from there. Another little update, we... yeah, our weight reduction and engine power failed once again. So we'll have to wait for those after this race, possibly after the next race. Unfortunate, but... those parts are definitely needed this, especially since we're halfway through this short season. But yeah, let's get right into qualifying. Alright guys, so pretty solid, 131.2. Alonso actually putting in a 129.9. Way better than what we did in practice, but unfortunately Dan Ticktum, he's still not getting those. We're trying to put our money towards him, but he's still not getting that pace up that we were looking for. So we're starting out Q14, moving into Q2. See if we can get a couple more positions, see if we can try to get into the top 10. So let's get right to Q2. All right, so our strategy with the old soft and new soft for Q2 kind of really worked out for us. We managed to push our vehicle to P7 with a 130.4. You can see that we lost a little bit of time there in the last few corners, but we made it to the final shootout. Try to get a better placement than P7, but with how these guys have been driving for qualifying, I don't think we can get much of a better improvement. So we will try and see what we can do. Looks like Mick Schumacher has a 5-place penalty. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what he has there. It's going to be illegal blocking. Won't tell us on who, but Mick Schumacher getting an illegal blocking penalty for qualifying. That's going to be 3 illegal blocking or 3 grid penalties so far this season, even though it's being a short season, and 2 of them being in one of the previous races. So yeah, now we were sitting in 11th behind Joe Granu. We ended up knocking him out as we improved our time, and Kevin Magnussen sitting in P10 for final shootout. So it's going to be 1 Haas, 1 Unity Motorsports, both Red Bulls, 1 AlphaTauri, and surprisingly 1 Mercedes. George Russell, I completely spaced out on George Russell. He didn't make it past Q1. So let's dive into Q3 and see if we can get a better time on this next run on the sets of softs that we do have left. So let's get right to it. Alright, as you guys can see by the clips that we showed, we set our time originally as a 130.38, and we tried to go for a double lap and try to improve, but those S-curves in Sector 2 to Sector 3 definitely didn't help. So we're going to be sitting at a 130.3, and we're going to jump to the end here and see how we place. I know for a fact that we're going to be losing some positions, but hopefully we get a decent place within the top 10, even though we only had 1 set of softs to run for this Q3. So let's get to the results.
With qualifying finished, it's time to remind ourselves once again of our top 3: Hamilton, Verstappen, and Carlos Sainz. Well, that wraps up qualifying, but don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow as we head into the Grand Prix.
Alright, yeah, so there's not really much gain on our 130.3. We get knocked back to P9 with Kevin Magnussen. We'll be starting out in the 5th row of the British Grand Prix in Silverstone. So the upgrades that we did get are definitely helping out, especially with our setup. We would have had a little bit better times because our dry setup is lower to the ground than our wet setup, but we are set up for that wet race. And that's probably why these other drivers have 129s and not like 127s and 128s, because they're running the higher profiles for the wet race that is upcoming. So let's get right to it.
Welcome along then to Great Britain and the Great Silverstone circuit for today's Grand Prix. Silverstone circuit then is 3.6 miles long, has a total of 18 corners, and of course is no stranger to the rain. There won't be any DRS available in these conditions, but the Wellington and Hangar straights are still good opportunities to tuck into the slipstream and make a pass. Off the back of a fantastic qualifying session, it's time to see how our starting grid looks like for today's race. An immense lap from Lewis Hamilton yesterday puts him on pole position, edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Sainz, Leclerc, Fernando Alonso and Ocon, Gasly, Johnson, Magnussen, and Guan Yu Zhou. Tsunoda, Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, and Perez. Bottas, Russell, Lance Stroll, and Mick Schumacher. Vettel, Albon, Ticktum, and Nicholas Latifi. It's almost time for the lights to go out, so let's head down to the track where preparations are underway. Well, it's not going to be plain sailing for our drivers today, although with the sky falling as it is, perhaps sailing isn't too far from the truth. Anthony Davidson, could be a wet one today. Great to have you with us. What are your thoughts?
It is a touch damp, isn't it? Well, as a driver, there are three big things to worry about when racing in these kind of conditions: standing water, tyre temperature, and visibility. Judging distance to the cars around you is really tricky when you're driving through the vast amounts of spray that these wet weather Pirelli tyres kick up.
We're still in with a chance of winning this title. We need you to push as hard as you can in the 5 remaining races.
All right, so we get bumped up to P8 there with the starting lineup. A little quick look at the rain jackets that we have for Unity Motorsports with Venturi Studios. Once again, you guys did a great job with this, and once again, I couldn't thank you guys anymore because there's always something that I see later on that I haven't seen yet. So yeah, the rain jackets definitely look really good, especially with the fade right there. So let's go ahead and get right into this here. Looks like a double wet race here. And then there's no personalized strategy here. So we're going to go bold here, and we're going to go ahead and split our pits right down the middle. We're going to go to a new set of wets right when the rain starts to decrease. If they want us to go to intermediates, then we'll hit intermediates. We are bound to hit some yellow flags with safety cars here. If people aren't careful, then they will be sliding off track. So yeah, so we're going to go ahead and drop it down to 27 laps even. We're going to go to the lower end, straight 50 kilograms, and get right into this race.
Okay, incredible parking there, nice one. That's going to give you the edge if you can get good launch as the race starts. Keep an eye on the lights. The start sequence will begin as soon as the grid is formed. Be ready with the clutch.
All right, our 5 red lights are up, and we are off here at Silverstone in the wet rain, holding our position pretty well, trying to take that position from Pierre Gasly coming up to the turn 1. And then turn 2, but we had to be extra careful. We actually gave it a little bit more room that we should have on turn 2, giving Pierre Gasly the inside. And then coming up to turn 3, we actually hold that position as Joe Guan Yu actually makes a move on Kevin Magnussen and Pierre Gasly. And then you can see Sergio Perez moving up there on the grid. As you can see, Joe Guan Yu in the mirrors are behind us as we're coming down the first straight here. The one thing I did notice with these tires is that there is a lot of understeer, especially with the amount of water that is on the track. And we had to worry about that a lot because we put a lot more wear and tear into our front tires than we did our back tires as well. Coming out of the back straight, coming into the S's, we're still losing a little bit of time between us and the top 6 of Esteban Ocon, but having to go a little bit wide there as we lose a little bit of control off the racing line. Joe Guan Yu tries to make another move on us, and then Kevin Magnussen is basically coming up into the back of our gearbox. We're on the outside lane here. We couldn't move on the inside, so we had to give Joe Granu some room. And I didn't notice it at first, but Venturi Bottas ends up going into the pits at the end of lap 1 for some front wing damage. So we'll be going over there shortly. Coming out of turn 1 and 2, he actually ends up hitting the back of Daniel Ricciardo and loses a little bit of the front wing there on the front left side. You can see the missing part there. We'll come over to a different perspective and take another look at that front wing, as you can see it there. So Venturi Bottas unlucky in having to come into the pits on the end of lap 1. Moving on to Pierre Gasly. He also had some issues on lap 2. A little bit of side pod bumping into George Russell here. A little bit of front wing damage, and as we're coming up to the S's, Pierre Gasly actually gets an engine failure. So Venturi Bottas dropping far back at the beginning of the race, and then the first DNF of the race with Pierre Gasly. He's actually one of our contenders during the championship right now, so if we can get some points, we can probably pass Pierre Gasly as he ends up going ghost there. Moving on to lap 6. We're about 6 seconds behind now of Joe Granu. The pace is still a little bit up there. Our car can't really handle it, so settling for P8, but our mechanics, I'm checking the weather with our mechanics, and they're basically telling me, hey, this rain is letting up, so we're going to have you come in and change to intermediates. There's not much going on, and it is the beginning of the race, so we went ahead and went with it. So, changing over to the intermediates on the start of lap 7, as we're in the back of the pack, and I don't believe Venturi Bottas even passes us while we're going to the pits. That's how much issues that he's having during this race. And as we're coming back out on the track here, there wasn't much fight within these next few laps. People making their pit stops to intermediates as we easily find ourselves back up into P13 behind Alexander Albon. And I believe he still has his wets, so we're trying to fight for a position here, and he still hasn't gone in for a pit. Trying to make a move on the inside here. And Sergio Perez actually closing in behind us here as we round out the end of lap 12. Coming up to the back end of the back straight into the S's into lap 12. I apologize. As you can see, Sergio Perez made a move on Alexander Albon, and we're trying to stay ahead of him as quick as possible. Sergio Perez a little bit faster than us on the intermediates. Moving on to lap 13, we're actually going to be on board with Daniel Ricciardo. He actually, as he was getting up to the S's, he actually had an engine issue, and it's going to be our second DNF of this race, as you can hear the engine kind of putting out there. And Pierre Gasly's pit DNF actually caused a virtual safety car, but Daniel Ricciardo's did not, because there was plenty of room for him to move and get out of the way off the track. But moving on to lap 15. Lap 15, so we still have some of those front runners making their pit stops onto intermediates as we try to close in on Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz as they're battling for position. And we still have Sergio Perez just over a second, just around a second behind us, as there's not much fighting going on, but we had to keep to our racing line. Moving on to the final lap here, Sergio Perez has caught up. We've had to defend our position a few times against him as we're coming up through the S's here. And that's basically going to solidify our position as Sergio Perez tries to make a move on the outside. We hold the inside line on his final right-hand turn. You can see him backing off in the mirrors. And we're going to be holding off Sergio Perez for P6 in Silverstone.
pick up rubber and bring it home.
And Mercedes have pulled off a great victory here today. Talk to me, Ants. What was it that set them apart from the competition today?
I think it was clear what the main contributing factor out on track was: speed. I know it sounds like an awfully reductive statement, but fast cars win races, and we saw that today with our winner.
After an excellent performance at the Grand Prix, I'm sure there'll be plenty of celebrations tonight amongst the Mercedes team, and they certainly deserve it. So let's review the drivers' standings. Charles Leclerc, currently leading the championship standings, extends his lead even further with this result. Some amazing talent out on the track today. But Anthony, who would you pick as your driver of the day?
Well, there was a lot of incredible driving out there today, but if I had to pick someone, it's got to be Sergio Perez. Fantastic driving.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari continue to extend the gap at the top of the table. Well, what an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.
All right, pretty challenging race this time. I ended up finishing in P6. So yeah, it was Fernando Alonso we were behind. We were trying to catch up to Fernando Alonso within those last few laps to try to get the top 5 for those 10 points, but we didn't manage to get that. Dan Ticktum bumped up from P21 to P14 for this race, so his pace is definitely there. It's just his racecraft needs to improve, so we are hoping to improve that. We ended up with an early pit stop to the intermediates, which was kind of unplanned, and I'm kind of surprised that we actually pushed those intermediates to the end of the race. I thought for sure that we had to come back in for another set. But yeah, even though those front tires wore out most, like they were over like 55% by the end of the race, and I had to frequently keep checking those tires because the front tires especially, like, they would wear out a lot faster here on Silverstone, where the back tires would retain their heat a lot more. So I thought that was a little strange, but it is Silverstone and it's a fast track and it's pretty level. Pierre Gasly and Daniel Ricciardo with both DNFs. Daniel Ricciardo had one short one in a sector, and then Pierre Gasly's caused a virtual safety car, so we tried to get as close as we could to, I believe it was Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo. But it was a decent race, so I can hardly remember. So I know I said it earlier during the replay, but yeah. So that's our current standings right now. We bumped back up to 11th for our driver standings against Daniel Ricciardo right now, and then constructor standings we're still sitting in 7th place between AlphaTauri and Aston Martin. For myself, I am definitely where the pace needs to be for the car, but we do need to try to save some of that money and put it in towards Dan Ticktum for his simulator and stuff like that. But as we round out towards the end of the season, we do still need to save some of that money for Dan Ticktum. I do plan on keeping him for the second season here in F122 for our 10 race seasons. And then we're going to be moving on to F123 after that second season finishes. So main priority right now is to save money up for Dan Ticktum for the contract, and then put whatever money we get into off of the period close for the end of the season into More than likely durability, and I believe engine, because we have our I believe it's our chassis facility is perked too. So yeah, that rounds up the race. We finally get points. We're back up there. Pretty good fight against Sergio Perez there in the last part of the race. Trying to defend a position against him. And really good fight with, I believe it was Lando Norris, that we were fighting for a position. If I'm wrong, then it's Daniel Ricciardo before he ended up being a DNF. But I believe it was Daniel Ricciardo actually. So yeah, pretty good fights for a position here in the middle of the race after we swapped over to the intermediates. But that's basically going to round out the rest of this race. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We will see you guys in the next episode.